Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino. I'm here with our other hosts, Joe LaVacca. You can find us both on Instagram at Joe Gambino DPT for myself, at Strength and Motion _PT for LaVacca over there. Podcast is on Instagram, Beyond Pain Podcast, and on YouTube if you prefer to watch the show, Cups of Joe _PT. As always, we do love to hear from you guys. So if you have a burning question in your mind, please shoot us a DM on Instagram. We are more than happy to chat. Welcome back, Joe.
Well, I should say,
and listeners,
welcome back to you, Joe.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
we missed you last
all
week.
Can hear my voice is still not there.
Still not great. Still not great. We're gonna have to do lots of editing.
You're gonna have to carry the show. I'm gonna be on mute a whole lot, so I'm not coughing into the microphone. And then probably about 3 times on this episode, I will not unmute myself to talk to you. That's how it's gonna go today. I foresee the future. I got my
that's a given.
Magic,
so basically,
my magic 8 ball here.
Normal episode. Sounds like just a normal episode. Well,
just put me
I'm
on your
glad
back and remind me that I'm still muted. There we go.
Well, glad you're back. Glad you're feeling better. Glad the kitties and the misses are feeling better as well. I'm sure all the listeners will gladly welcome you back rather than listening to me rant just for on and on and on like I did last week. But hopefully there was some good takeaways there that people were able to apply either to themselves or the clinic. And first thing I wanted to ask you was, were you guys affected by this crazy Arctic vortex or polar vortex that just came literally out of nowhere? I had the...
Oh, you can finish it up. I was going to say we were yesterday, 2 days ago. It was a high of 45 and we had a low of like 25. So I had to do all the winter proofing of the house at that point. I had to turn off the hose bibs. I had to wrap up a couple of our palms that we have in the back and our banana trees, and got a couple of things done. Turn off all the water, the irrigation. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. And then it's like 60 degrees today and yesterday. So go figure.
Totally wild.
A 1 day blip on the radar.
That's a lot of work. Yeah, shut off irrigation systems, wrap trees.
There's a couple hours of work to kind of get everything ready in the midst of trying to work, be sick. Jen was completely out of it. So I was taking care of both kids. So it was a day.
Dad of the year right there. You just won it. You won it on 1 days of performance, my friend.
1 day,
very
that's
good.
all I need.
That's all you need. All you need is...
Jen's mom is here, so I still have help, so I can't take all the credit. But I will.
Asterisk. This like finding out your favorite baseball player took steroids. Oh,
exactly.
My God.
Exactly.
What a disappointment. What a disappointment.
Dad and husband of the year, asterisk at the top. I'll take it.
Yeah, I recall, I always think about the South. And I'm going to put you in the South whenever these vortexes happen. And I was on my rotation with Louisiana State University in the hospital system down there. And I was down there for about 3 months when I was in school. And I remember a polar vortex rolling through, and it dropped the temperatures to about, 35 degrees, like just kind of like right above freezing, and people were losing their minds. No idea what to do. Emergency broadcast systems being activated. The hospitals having emergency meetings. It's crazy when it happens that quickly with little warning. I had the air conditioning on in my apartment on Sunday night, and then I had to put the heat on midway through the next afternoon. And I don't think I've ever had that dramatic of a swing. Usually I can tolerate these long stretches between summer and winter where it's like either the windows are open or heat or air is just not on, period. It's just kind of comfortable in the house. I don't think I've ever had this dramatic 24-hour shift. So we're glad the South made it. We're glad that Jen's mom was there to help you out. We're glad that you guys are feeling better. So that brings us to today. What the heck are we talking about today, my friend?
We can just talk about the weather for an entire episode, but I don't think, maybe our listeners will enjoy it, but I doubt it. So let's, we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about what happens or why it doesn't happen, and how can we prevent when we have these areas of our bodies that we just feel like we can't activate. The glutes are a big one, so maybe we'll just focus in and around there. But I mean, there are definitely other areas where people say that you can't feel certain things activates. I will let you, since you're carrying the team today, and my voice is here nor there, take this whichever direction that you please, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think the best way to probably take it is how I hear clients talk about it. And this is such a common idea or story. And I understand it. I do. I fought it for a while, but I understand from a client perspective why things can sort of feel, quote unquote, inhibited, asleep. Some particular muscle has amnesia or is not activating. And I can also see from a clinician sense why focusing on a single muscle or single exercise would be an easy way to help people out of pain. But I think it's definitely worth discussing, and that's kind of our goal for today. So let's start with just this idea of, does a muscle not activate when people are in pain? And short of a nerve injury, your muscles are always going to be on or activated to some degree as long as you're up and moving and sitting and walking and blah, blah, blah. Now, I do think, and there's plenty of sort of studies to show this, that the output of muscles is decreased in the presence of pain. So a muscle's job or your nervous system's job is to protect tissues that are sensitive. One of the ways to do that is to inhibit or kind of just turn down the volume of muscle activation or nervous system activity in an area to reduce force. Maybe it kind of makes you move a little bit stiffer, but that's the whole point of protection when we have pain and when we're trying to heal, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, depending on what's going on. So yes, it is normal for people, I think, to feel a little unstable, a bit weak when they are in pain. However, I also think that that's relatively normal, especially in the beginning. And we've talked a little bit about the differences between acute pain and persistent pain. In the acute pain scenario, I want that muscle to turn off. I want to maybe reduce force or load or movement through an area. I want you to take these protective strategies. Maybe you brace a little bit more. Maybe you limp. Maybe you lean to one side. These are all cool. These are all ways that your body is recovering. So we want to guide that process early on. We want to break those patterns when they're no longer needed. But however, that doesn't always happen. And when that doesn't happen, our nervous systems are also very good at adapting. So I take on some of these new behaviors. I continue the limp, I continue the lean, I continue avoidance, and therefore that maybe weak muscle or weaker area stays deconditioned. So I'm going to pause there. Is that seemingly your view of that? Does that sound like, at least preliminarily, what patients share with you when you're in treatment sessions with them?
Yeah, I think the way you described it as a kind of protective mechanism, this force output, the way that our body is being able to process information, it has been altered. So you just can't physically create as much force or maybe feel a muscle in the same way that you would have in the past. And as you're talking, it brought up a couple of things for me that I think that we can kind of dive deeper on, that I think will kind of, maybe weave us in a direction where I think it will give us a very, the conversation, I think, will be in a good place here. So I think what you said is, PTs, it's something, I think it's like easy for us to describe it to somebody. It comes in as like this oversimplified, oh, your back hurts because you can't activate your core or because you can't activate your glutes. And it's this very simplified version. So there's two things that I kind of want to talk about here and get your thought process on, because I think I think in our industry, from fitness standpoint and from a rehab standpoint, that this message has been getting out there for so long that clients fixate on it. So there's this fixation, oh, my back hurts because my core doesn't fire, or my back hurts because my glutes don't fire. And it's very likely, and now we're playing like the chicken or the egg scenario. So I kind of want this conversation to go down the rabbit hole of, do you see or do you view this doesn't activate as I need to address this for this person, and their symptoms will get better? Or do you view it as a symptom of the more underlying root cause that has kind of led down the rabbit hole to now you can't feel something work and all these other issues that may come around it?
Yeah, I think again, it depends, right? If it's earlier on and we're sort of into this phase of re-educating the muscle or re-exposing the area that's sensitive to movement or load, then yeah, I want to put the muscle in positions that are most comfortable, or maybe sort of like more opportunistic for it to create some effort. But these are going to be pretty low level things. There'll be table clamshells, there'll be bridges, maybe they're going to be doing some breath work, maybe they do some, very light work with bands. But that early on process is sort of to just maintain and help that area heal by guiding it in the right direction with force. The problem becomes maintaining that idea that now I have to continue to reactivate an area, start with low level like isometrics or breath work, every time I go to do an activity. And or now having that continue even further, as it's done in some clients with, well, now I can't lift heavy because, I have these weak glutes, or I have these poor postural stabilizers that aren't coming online. So again, when it is in this idea of acute phase, yeah, I want to address it early on, but I also want people to feel comfortable almost finding that area again. Like, oh, okay, I can feel something else other than pain here. I can feel fatigue. I can feel muscular soreness again. And I think that gives them that direction of saying, wow, okay, there's lots of things I can do, even though running might be off the table right now, or deadlifting might be off the table right now, or you name it, that I can do to kind of keep myself conditioned. And these are just gateway exercises or gateway movements back into more complex things like squats and lunges and, more compound lifts that require my full body, which is where most people want to get back to anyway. So yes, to both of your questions, I think, is that it really just depends on where people are in their rehab and how much of that initial story framework of healing have they carried on with them just a little bit too long, where I don't think they need these low level activities or exercises or light band work to quote unquote activate, when a generic warm up will probably just do the trick. Or we just walk you right over to whatever we're going to do first, your squats, your deadlifts, your lunges, whatever. Start with body weight, add 10% of the load you did last week, add 50% of the load you did last week. And then there's your specific warm up, and let's get going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, the way I look at it is that most, if someone's constantly complaining with it over and over again, your muscles are not firing. It's not like the main cause of your symptoms. Most likely, it's probably going to be a result of whatever is underlying and driving your symptoms, or maybe just the pain in itself. Because if it was just purely an activation issue, you wouldn't have to find yourself constantly needing that stimulus to feel like you can feel your glutes or your whatever feels a little bit better. It wouldn't have to be this constant, like once it strengthens, right, it should be strong again. The output should be there. It shouldn't like reset constantly. That's kind of one of the things that I've found. And I think, obviously pain is one of those things that will change the way that our bodies produce force and things like that, right? And how it moves in general. So bringing down the pain response is one of those first things that we need to do in order to give somebody the opportunity to actually strengthen those things and create a better input there. I do think that particularly rotational deficits in mobility, especially active, can play into that. And when we have some sort of capsular something, or even if there's like impingement stuff going on, when there's some sort of capsular issues going on, we know that that's where a lot of our, how our body figures out where we are in space and how much force is and how, and then, things within that nature, like this is where we're gathering all of our information. So, working on some of that stuff, and even just like, how can, I've done a lot of like, how do we load rotation in flexion? I think that's the more common one, but I've also done it in extension and then all the ranges in between. I think even personally for myself, that's made a huge difference in like how stiffness and things feel when I'm lifting, and activating has made a huge difference for me. So I think capsular stuff is a big one in there. And then I had one more other one in my brain, and it's gone now. So it will come to me later. But
Well, question for you. What do you mean by loading into that rotation, right? Again, like for people maybe not familiar with that. What does
so
that mean? Was that more?
I will literally do either like actual, almost like strength training. So I'll use a band or a pulley or an ankle weight or whatever it is to physically like load myself, starting from like an actual end range, like maybe internal rotation I'm starting with, and then work it all the way through like full range to my end range external rotation and back. So you're getting eccentric and a concentric in both directions. Sometimes it's just I do isometrics as well at an end range, or, whether lengthened or shortened for long durations and drive like significant fatigue. I think, and that's one thing that, his name is escaping me. We did a course in New York with him. Your buddy from Chicago that he did rock tape with. I don't know why I can't remember his name right
Adam,
now. Yeah.
Adam.
We did, when we did that, that was probably one of the bigger things that I took from that course is like these longer duration isometrics to just help build awareness in your brain again. Cause that whole process is actually just talking about it with a patient the other day about cortical smudging and like how when we have pain and disuse, the areas of our brain where we have a representation for that body part can be kind of distorted in a sense. So again, like why our bodies aren't able to produce as much force, or we don't have as much awareness to those areas. So doing stuff like that, where we can create these longer duration isometrics, create some fatigue, put some strength inputs. I think when we're also bringing down pain and working on any sort of deficits from a mobility perspective, as all those things start to come together, then all of a sudden now you feel like things activate better. You can feel that muscle more. You can fatigue that muscle better. And then all that stuff carries over to your lifting and the things that you want to do. And the other one that I was trying to think of that I forgot was I think there's a lot of people who are just limited in hip extension. And obviously, if you're missing that kind of range of motion, you're going to have a harder time feeling those, things on the backside. If we're talking about glutes not firing, that's going to be a big one as well. So I think being able to get into positions is just as important as anything else when we're trying to feel something work or activate, when we're trying to extend in a squat or in a deadlift, or if we're trying to run, right, like sprinting, say, where we really need triple extension. If you're limited in these ranges of motion, right, your body's going to have to figure out another way to kind of get around that. So those are all my thoughts, Joe. Yeah, I'll take your thoughts now.
No, I think you did a good job explaining the idea of workspace. Right? Like every joint has a space that it can work in, quote unquote, to make a shape. So for people who are stuck and this idea of, hey, I can't get X, Y, or Z to activate or turn on. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Then when we just go bring it back to some rudimentary assessments, basic stuff, we can find a lot of these opportunities with rotation in a hip, extension in a hip, flexion in the shoulder. And when you sort of come at it from that angle of, well, hey, if you can't make a shape or if you can't get into position, how do we expect the muscle to activate in that position when now it's already maybe in a really, really shortened state? And a shortened state would make it insufficient to produce force, or it's just not able to exert the same amount of pull optimally, or it might just be blocked by pain at that point. I mean, when you're starting to force a joint into position to get it to turn on without the proper mobility or maybe like progressive overload strategies to put you in that position, it's going to just hurt. People are just going to probably cramp and they're going to be super sore. And again, without that proper education or understanding that, this could be an expectation, it's going to feel pretty frustrating pretty quickly. So yeah, I think taking the brakes off or clearing the runway, these are phrases I use with clients a lot. Let's open up the area for movement and then see what's left over. You might find that a better moving joint just feels better and you don't have to go through all these activation drills because, to your point, now your brain, nervous system, tissues are all sort of on the same page again, and they can figure it out. So now all we have to do is really just put you in these positions, reteach you some basic concepts with hinging or squatting or pushing or pulling, whatever we're working on, and then just let your body take the reins and start to get exposed again. I think my question to you, and this kind of came up with a client this week, is that sometimes these narratives stick, but patients just feel better doing them. I had an opportunity to work with a client who's had some, really persistent back pain. We were talking about, some of the things she does with her trainer and some of the things that she's done in the past. And she very specifically was like doing some specific core bracing, core activation, hip isometrics just makes me feel better for my lift. And in that case, I'm totally cool with it. That makes you feel better. If you like specific warm-ups versus general warm-ups, then do your specific warm-up. So will you take that same approach, again, like giving the patient the reins there to, hey, if isometrics makes you feel good, if this core bracing makes you feel good prior to a lift, if turning something on makes you think that you're more engaged and ready to go, do you let them go? Or will you try to kind of redirect the narrative to something maybe more beneficial?
No, I would just let them go because I'm a big proponent of if it makes you feel better, you should probably be doing a lot more of it, right? Because the whole part of it, right, is as the more we can bring down the pain response, the more likely the frequency, the intensity of the discomfort is going to start to change. So I let them roll with it. Plus, it's a confidence, right? Like you want someone to go into their workouts feeling as confident as possible. Anytime there's fear and apprehension, those are always symptoms that I'm weary about, right? If someone's like, "Oh, I'm nervous to squat," like if you start to squat them under load, like the chances of them not moving well or feeling pain afterwards, I think is just going to be higher. So if you could they say, "Oh, I like these like 2 exercises. I feel really great. Like when I'm at the bottom of my squat, I feel super open." Well, sure, that's a great warm up for you on those days where you're doing lower body, and then you feel confident, and you can go out and you can push the needle a little bit more, and you're probably also not going to hold back. Right? Those people will actually probably like do RPEs of maybe 8s and 9s because they feel more confident as opposed to like, I'm only going to do a 6 today, and then you're not really going to get the stimulus that you want from a strength perspective anyway. So then you're probably going to either want to modify the squat or not. So I would let them roll with it, let them do it. Again, from a confidence perspective and just feeling good perspective, that's money.
Yeah, I think the only time I ever interject is when people start to talk about time and if their workouts are running long and I have all these things to do and I can't get to this and I can't get to that. And then that's when I'll typically offer, well, hey, instead of spending all this time setting your hip and mobilizing this and rolling around on the floor and doing all these things that were helpful in the past, why don't we just hop on the bike and get your bike going, your heart rate going rather for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes? Work at a nice progressive scale. First minute can be easy. Second minute, a little bit harder. Third minute, a little bit harder than that, right? So by the time you get off the bike, you're maybe huffing and puffing a little bit. You're already sweating and then you're feeling good and you're ready to go. And then just gradually start with your lifts or just start with your lifts. Start with the body weight motion, gradually add a little bit of weight. Thing is, I'll have people do body weight, then 50% of the weight that they used the week before, and then 75% of the weight they used the week before, right? And these are sort of like maybe they do 12 body weight, 10 at 50%, then maybe 5 at 50%, 5 at 75%. And then we make a decision. How are you feeling? Do you think you need one more groove set just to sort of get going before we launch you into your working sets? Or are you feeling pretty good? And even then, that could be a way to cut off 5, 10, whatever minutes into your workout. So the only time I'll interject with that client is when they start to report time as a factor, when they're not getting everything, when they're feeling like a little bit rushed at the gym, or maybe they're just going at a time that it's so busy. It's hard to find space, equipment to do different things. So then that's when I'll kind of coach them to just give them this other option.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think in the case if someone was doing that much foam rolling, a bunch of activation work, I need to set this and set that, and it's taking them 20, 30 minutes, that's probably too long. So there would have to be some sort of education, like, okay, how do we get that down to 10 minutes, right? What's like your 1 or 2, like what are 2 areas of your body that make you feel ready to squat, if that was the case for that particular person? And then what is 1 or 2 movement that like activation drills that make you feel really good? And now you can do that in 5 minutes, then you can get on the bike or do something else more specific, maybe some plyos or whatever it is that you feel like you need. Then you can do that as the finish for your warm up, and then you can get right into your warm up sets or working sets or whatever the session looks like from that perspective. I think that's well said. I think if anyone listening, if you're doing 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes of warming up, it's likely going to be way too much, and you can definitely condense that. And I think that starts to lend towards probably a more underlying bigger issue that needs to be addressed at that point.
Yeah. And I think the context there is like in a strength session, right? So if your
Correct.
primary goal is strength, right, then you don't need all that. If you're at home and you're doing a low level recovery day, then hey, all your isometrics are great. Your repeated movements are great. That's going to be your recovery from your heavy lift the day before or your long run the day before. So unless that's your target, probably don't need that much. So I would say for me, in summary, a lot of these muscle inhibition turned off ideas are pretty normal in the acute phase. Give your body some compassion, give your body some space. We don't necessarily need to overload those areas and turn them back on instantly. Let healing occur. If we're still seeing those deficits outside of normal healing times or healing parameters we would expect, yeah, then let's, to your point, reintegrate your nervous system, reintegrate some of these maps in your brain, reintroduce and condition the tissues that maybe haven't been exposed in a long time. And then that is our gateway into the higher level things, not necessarily that they need to be there forever and ever because your hip had turned off once before, is now turned off. And that is your only way that you can squat and deadlift and run and, return to sport. So I think that's where my takeaways would go. Do you have anything else to add there, Joe?
Yeah, just one last thought, and if you don't have any others, you can take us home. But I think the last thing, just on your point of compassion and just expectations. I know we talk a lot about expectations here on this podcast. If activation is an issue, don't expect it to change in one session or two sessions. Right? This is something that's going to take some time as your pain comes down, as you're working on mobility, as you're working on whatever it is that is going to be needed to kind of get you there. And just imagine, right? It's going to take you a few weeks to actually start to see some of those changes that you want to see. So I think people also get a little too impatient. It's like, oh, my glute's not activating. Then I do this drill and then I feel really good. And then the next time I go lift, it's like, well, I felt the same as I did before. And then it gets disheartening for somebody, especially when if someone is in chronic pain or someone's been dealing with this for a while. So just remember that, like, sometimes you just need a little bit more.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Joe. Well, we're happy to have you back, my friend. We love you. Listeners, we love you. And don't forget to come back next week for another exciting episode of the Beyond Pain podcast. I still don't think I get this right.
Not too shabby, Joe. Not too shabby.